a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Houston, integrity, comm check.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
The Artemis II crew back in range after travelling the furthest from Earth than any humans have ever done before.
Donald Trump threatens to obliterate Iran in 4 hours tonight unless a deal is reached to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
The boss of Wireless Festival defends booking Kanye West as a headliner and asks people to offer the rapper forgiveness.
Also ahead later on this morning, we're going to speak to the star of Line of Duty, Vicky McClure, about her new show exploring the murders that have changed the nation.
Plus, as a 6-day doctor strike begins this morning, the NHS urges patients to keep their appointments. We'll hear from the Health Secretary. Hello, very good morning. And we're going to start today with some good news. In fact, some inspirational news, because humans have now travelled further from Earth than at any point in history.
Yeah, the crew of Artemis II reached more than 250,000 miles from planet Earth as they completed an unprecedented flyby around the far side of the moon.
Yeah, the crew lost comms to mission control and were totally cut off in space for around 40 minutes when they were behind the moon. They then re-emerged to a solar eclipse, becoming the first people ever to view an eclipse from space. The crew called it just indescribable.
I bet. And if that wasn't enough, they also got a call of congratulations from President Donald J. Trump. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, has our top story.
It's all of humankind in one grainy picture. Orion's 4 crew further from home than anyone in history. The other 8 billion of us on the crescent Earth in the blackness beyond. The last image from the spacecraft before it looped behind the moon, blocking contact with Earth, and a final message from the crew.
To all of you down there on Earth and around Earth, we love you from the moon.
Houston copies. We'll see you on the other side.
40 minutes later, they were back.
Integrity, comm check.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
Sunlight flooding the capsule as it came round the far side of the moon. If it was a tense moment, it didn't show. But this was already a day of spacefaring and scientific firsts.
This is the iconic, the historic mission control at Houston, where they're controlling the whole of the Artemis operations. Come and take a look.
We'd arrived just in time for the longest distance wake-up call in history.
Hello, Artemis II. This is Apollo astronaut Jim Lovell. Welcome to my old neighborhood. It's a historic day, and I know how busy you'll be, but don't forget to enjoy the view.
Well, it's amazing. It's a voice from the past, from the iconic Apollo era, Jim Lovell there, waking up the crew, wishing them good luck with today's most important day of the mission so far.
A few hours later, Orion's crew had flown further than anyone before and into the space history books.
Over 55 years ago, Lovell, Swigert, and Hayes flew 248,655 statute miles away from Earth. Today, for all humanity, you're pushing beyond that frontier.
To mark the moment, the crew named a crater on the moon after their spacecraft Integrity, and another in memory of Commander Reed Wiseman's wife, who died of cancer 6 years ago.
And so we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol, the spouse of Reed, the mother of Katie and Ellie. And if you want to find this one, you look at Glushko, and it's just to the northwest of that, at the same latitude as Ohm, and it's a bright spot on the moon. And we would like to call it Carol, and you spell that C-A-R-R-O-L-L.
The crew took a moment to wipe the tears from their eyes as it was time to train them on the moon and make detailed observations for scientists back on Earth.
Human eyes are just different than cameras. They see things in a different way. They're really good at picking up things like subtle color differences, subtle textural differences. I'm actually more excited to hear from them, to hear their words, than I am to see the pictures they're taking.
There's just a lot of texture
that just pops right out at you when you can zoom in.
A third of the way up from the southernmost part of the Terminator looked like a dinosaur print. If one was running to the northwest, now is clearly a crater with a bunch of craters around it.
Then, after their flyby, an unexpected call from President Trump, who until now had been conspicuously silent about America's success with Artemis.
It's an honor to speak to you, and I wanted to congratulate each and every one of you. And tell me, what is the most unforgettable part of this really historic day? The whole world is watching and listening. Please tell me.
Mr. President, to be here with you speaking about our incredible day today. I think one of the biggest highlights was coming back from the far side of the moon and having the first glimpses of planet Earth again.
Their time at the moon is dictated by forces beyond their control. It's gravity now turning their spacecraft around. But it treated them to one last spectacle, an eclipse of the sun, before swinging them back towards Earth and home.
Thumbs up all round. Let's go to Mission Control in Houston, Texas, and bring in Tom Clark, who joins us now live. Tom, just an incredible moment for that team, for science, and what for humanity, I guess.
I mean, what a day. I can't tell you how lucky I feel to have been here on this really historic moment in the history of spaceflight. It was, and you really got a sense of excitement here. I mean, I hesitate to say this, but they're over the moon. And because, there was a lot of doubt about getting this spacecraft off the ground, multiple delays to this expensive, over-budget mission. And they've got them there. They've got them around the moon. Lots of milestones to come, and it's no mean feat doing the re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere and landing them safely. The administrator of NASA saying, he's not going to judge this mission a success till they're safely under the parachutes coming back to the Pacific Ocean 5 days from now. But the fact that they achieved this moment, the spacecraft is working well. And they've also succeeded. We haven't seen the pictures yet. They're downloading them now overnight here in the US to give them over to the scientists. But there's hopefully a lot they can learn by having human eyes. And in some parts of the moon, they will have been the first human eyes ever to have seen them, describe those features, photograph them, annotate them. And that will help inform just general science about how our solar system came to be, but also pave the way and inform future missions. Because remember, this is a test flight or at the beginning of a very big program that NASA plans to conduct to land humans on the moon in a couple of years' time and start building a moon base there and occupying the south pole of the moon for into the 2030s.
And Tom, you talk about human eyes, and that is quite important, isn't it? It turns out the fact that there are people who are looking at some parts of the far side of the moon that no one has seen before, and apparently that we have a kind of unique way of seeing some of the subtleties and nuances of the moon that perhaps machines and robots wouldn't capture.
That's absolutely right. In terms of the amount of data a satellite, going over the moon can gather, it's way more than the human eye. You could got pixels of thousands of them, you can scan it. But what it can't see is gradual changes in a dynamic way as the lighting changes, as things move. And according to the scientists, that was what I was interested to hear. You heard it in the report there. The scientists saying, I'm almost as interested to hear what the astronauts have to say about what they're seeing than the images themselves, because they can describe features that don't necessarily come out using those well-used techniques to study other planets. And it is quite an important point as well, because it's sometimes difficult, and it's a legitimate question to ask, why do we spend so much money? I mean, it's nearly $100 billion of US taxpayers' money they've spent so far on the Artemis program, and there's a lot more of that to come. What are we getting in return? And you can do different kinds and unique kinds of science by sending people into space. But also, just looking at those images today, that moment when we're looking back on all of us on planet Earth, from going behind the moon, those 4 people being further from home than anyone in history, and then being separated from communicating for 40 minutes, those kind of moments, I think, justify that as well. Just the human endeavour, the bravery and the phenomenon of travelling into places unknown is awe-inspiring, to be honest. And I hope it comes across as clearly, back in the UK as it did, here in Mission Control today, because it was just an incredible experience.
Well, you really are in the best place there, Tom. It must have been an incredible atmosphere there. Tom, thanks very much indeed. We'll talk to you again a little bit later,
Thanks,
of
Tom.
course.
Yeah, and we're going to have a special programme on the moon mission. It'll be on at 9:30 here on Sky News. An incredible moment, as Thomas pointed out. Fascinating what they're going to discover. And I wonder now if they're on that, have that feeling of when your holiday's about to come to an end and you're on the way back.
Home.
You're going to start making your way back and you realise it's going to be back to reality. It's going to be literally back down to earth for these guys.
I reckon it's probably still pretty exciting.
Still pretty good. You're still in space.
Now, to the US-Israel war on Iran now, and Donald Trump has threatened to obliterate Iran in one night unless the Strait of Hormuz is reopened in just a few hours' time.
Yeah, Trump says that Tehran has until 1 a.m. UK time to comply with his deadline, or the US will destroy every major bridge and every power plant and face what he's called living in hell. Now, if he does go ahead, this would amount to a series of war crimes and drive energy prices up yet again. Well, here he is making the threat.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to. We don't want that to happen.
Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us this morning. Hi to you, Sally. So we could hear Donald Trump there last night doubling down on his threat to Iran. Iran, of course, in turn has threatened to retaliate if Donald Trump does carry out this threat of bombing bridges and power infrastructure. So what's the mood there? Is there much nervousness where you are?
Yeah, it seems deadline day is finally here after Donald Trump moved that date twice. It really did seem that he doesn't want to follow through with these threats, but Iran has not agreed to a deal. And I think there is a lot of nervousness in this region. People are watching this very closely. I'm sure there are a lot of people hoping that this is another taco moment. Trump always chickens out. And we have less than 24 hours to find out. But certainly the stakes are very high indeed here. You have the US president saying they are going to attack each and every one of Iran's bridges and power plants and essentially take out the country in one night. He dismissed any concerns about this being potential war crimes. And then you have an Iranian official calling on the country's young people to form human chains around the country's power plants. I mean, when you've got the American president threatening to take out a country in one night and human chains potentially being formed around critical domestic infrastructure, which would potentially be targeted, you can definitely say for sure that this war is moving into a dangerous new phase. The question is just what lies ahead and how much worse are things going to get? Well, Iran has already said that if Donald Trump follows through with these threats, they will attack critical domestic infrastructure in the region, including potentially desalination plants, which this region is extremely reliant on for drinking water. We've already seen 2 desalination plants hit in this war so far, one in Bahrain and one in Kuwait. And in the last few days, Iran has successfully managed to hit oil refineries in Kuwait and Bahrain. They've hit a petrochemical facility in Abu Dhabi. The extent isn't clear. The extent of damage isn't clear. But the concern is that we will see more of that. And just how bad is this going to get for people living here? One other thing to mention is that just before Donald Trump's deadline, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight, 4 a.m. for people here in the UAE, 1 a.m. tomorrow morning if you're in the UK, there is a UN Security Council vote on a resolution to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's been massively watered down from its original draft, and there's no suggestion it's going to make any material difference. But certainly there is an attempt for some sort of international consensus to try and find a solution to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, is proving Donald Trump's biggest headache in this war. That is what he wants to see happen in order for him to back down from these threats. But Iran is not going to relinquish their most powerful weapon in this war. They have serious leverage for as long as the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. And they're saying we are not going to reopen that for safe passage for commercial shipping if we do not have a cast iron guarantee that we will not be invaded again. There is zero trust between Tehran and Washington. Tehran is appearing extremely vengeful, and it feels like this war is moving into a potentially new dangerous phase. We've got a few hours left to find out.
All right, Sally, for now, in the UAE, thank you for that. And of course, we'll have more from Sally and team throughout the day. As she rightly points out, we're now in this countdown moment whether or not Donald Trump is going to fulfill a huge threat to potentially commit war crimes by bombing every Iranian bridge and every Iranian power plant, knocking them back to the Stone Age. So we'll find out as the hours commence.
We will indeed. In the meantime, the boss of Wireless Festival has defended booking Kanye West as a headline act and asked the public to forgive the rapper for anti-Semitic remarks he's made in the past.
Yeah, the managing director of Festival Republic, Melvin Ben, said that giving people a second chance is becoming a lost virtue, but many in the Jewish community are unconvinced. The head of the board of British Deputies of British Jews is calling for Wireless to just drop Kanye. Let's bring in Molly Byrne, our correspondent, who's covering this for us. So, Molly, look, yesterday we had, I think, two sponsors pulling out. We've had another couple, and then now we've finally heard from Wireless. What's the latest on this?
Well, this is a festival where tickets actually go on sale today, and Kanye West is supposed to be headlining 3 days at this festival in London, performing to around 150,000 people. But what we've seen, as you say, in recent days and then over the weekend is this big backlash from Jewish groups, from politicians, but also crucially from sponsors as well. The two main sponsors, Pepsi and Diageo, pulling out. And this is all because of Kanye West's previous anti-Semitic remarks and comments. People might remember, but he'd previously released a song called Heil Hitler. He'd sold swastika T-shirts. And so we've seen these big sponsors pull out of sponsoring the festival, and the Prime Minister as well criticising the booking, calling it deeply concerning. And overnight we heard from the organiser, who did say that Kanye's previous comments were abhorrent, but insisted in a statement saying we're not giving him a platform to extol opinion of whatever nature, only to perform the songs that are currently played on the radio stations in our country and the streaming platforms in our country and listened to and enjoyed by millions. Forgiveness and giving people a second chance are becoming a lost virtue in this ever-increasing divisive world. And I'd ask people to reflect on their instant comments of disgust at the likelihood of him performing As Was Mine and offer some forgiveness and hope to him, as I've decided to do. So that was almost a kind of plea to action in a way, the organisers wanting the festival to go ahead as is. But then in response, we had Phil Rosenberg, as you said, who's president of the board of Deputies of British Jews. He said Melvin Ben's statement will not reassure many within the Jewish or other communities against whom Kanye West's invective was directed over a much longer period than his more recent apology. It's time for Wireless to do the decent thing and rescind an invitation they should never have offered. Kanye West may well be on the path to health and healing. We sincerely hope that he is, but the space to test this is not over 3 days on the Wireless main stage. And we've also learned over the weekend that ministers are reviewing Kanye West's permission to enter the UK. That's a measure that's available to them, and Australia took a similar move last year. We haven't had an official response from Kanye West. We have reached out for comment. It's worth saying that he has apologised. His latest apology came in January 2026, but he's made previous apologies in the past and then was sort of seen to backtrack on them. So a big decision for organisers to take over the coming days.
Yeah, and not just organisers, the government as well, potentially whether he gets a visa. Molly, for now, thank you very much for that.
Let's get more now on the resident doctor strike, which began a few minutes ago at 7 a.m, plus plenty of other issues, because Health Secretary Wes Streeting is here with me now to talk about that and other issues of the day. Good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. So the BMA are saying that this strike, which, as I say, started at 7 o'clock this morning, will bring disruption. So can you be straight with people and tell us how challenging it's going to be to offer patients the care they need over the coming days of this strike?
Well, we don't want strike action to put people off from coming forward if they need medical attention. Emergency services are running. We've managed to maintain, we think, about 95% of planned care due to take place today, so things like tests and scans, surgeries, procedures. But I'm not going to pretend that there aren't consequences for this disruption. If you're someone who's waited for your test or scan or your operation, chances are you've been waiting a lot longer than I would like you to. And so psyching yourself up for that moment and then getting the cancellation can be both bitterly disappointing and in some cases will leave people waiting in pain or anxiety longer than is necessary. And it costs the NHS significantly. Every time the BMA takes resident doctors out on strike, it costs the NHS about £50 million a day. So this strike action is going to cost us about £300 million. What I find extraordinary about the situation that we're in is that the BMA, when this government came in, having been treated badly by the Conservatives, we don't doubt that, this government came in and gave resident doctors a 28.9% pay rise, and they still went on strike. We've put a deal to the BMA, which we had negotiated in good faith with their officers who endorsed the deal and put it to their committee. It included a 4.9% pay rise this year on average, as high as 7.1% for some of their members. They still went on strike. It would have created an extra 4,500 training places, 1,000 materialising this month, and they still went on strike. Would have cancelled mandatory exam fees, costing resident doctors thousands of pounds, and they've still gone on strike.
They say that's because pay is still a fifth lower in this offer than it was in 2008. You say that the cost of the strike is about £50 million a day. The BMA is saying, well, if you paid that to doctors, then perhaps we could get closer to finding a deal.
So I'd say two things. Firstly, there's a reason why the BMA choose 2008 as the benchmark for where they think pay should be tracked back to. That's because in 2008, we'd had a Labour government for just over a decade, and they had enjoyed consistent pay rises under that Labour government. This Labour government has been for less than 2 years. Resident doctors have been the standout winners of the entire public sector, and they've still gone on strike. I don't doubt that over more than a decade of Conservative government, the pay of resident doctors and the entire public sector was eroded. That fact is not in dispute. I don't pretend that in less than 2 years, a Labour government has solved all of the issues facing resident doctors, but I would also ask the BMA not to pretend that a Labour government can solve all of the problems of more than a decade in the making in less than 2 years. Negotiation is about give and take. Getting this country out of the mess it is in, thanks to more than a decade of Conservative government, requires all of us to pull together. The government's done a lot of giving, the BMA's done a lot of taking.
OK, so can you confirm no more money for doctors? Are you prepared just to ride out these strikes? This is the 15th since 2023.
Yes, we will mitigate against strike action. We'd prefer it not to take place. I've never closed the door to the BMA. The offer is there, albeit now without the training places that would have materialised this month. And as the costs of BMA strike action mounts up, what I am not prepared to do is to make other groups of NHS staff pay. So we're currently in negotiation with nurses, midwives, other NHS staff, many of whom are never paid as much in their entire careers as the lowest paid doctors. I'm not going to allow the costs of the BMA strike action to impact on them when many of them don't earn as much as doctors. The other thing I'd say on affordability is this. BMA staff, the staff who work for the BMA, have themselves been out on strike because of a 2.75% pay offer they've received from the BMA. How does the BMA justify such a low pay offer? Affordability grounds. So the BMA seem to be saying, we can't afford to give our staff 2.75%, but the taxpayer should give our doctors another 28% on top of that, which they've already had.
I want to pick you up on the issue of removing the 1,000 specialty training places from the offer. Isn't that cutting off your nose to spite your face? I mean, obviously the resident doctors will be disappointed, but isn't this bad news for the NHS as well, to lose that speciality?
No, look, there aren't fewer jobs as a result of this, because what we were doing is converting locally employed doctor posts into training places. The reason why resident doctors will be disappointed, and many of them are, is because those training places come with more pay and career progression opportunities for those doctors. I've been candid, I have not had NHS leaders banging on my door demanding more of these places. The reason why we negotiated these training places because I recognised there were bottlenecks that were affecting resident doctors. I haven't taken those places away. The BMA rejected them. Their position seems to be, We reject the deal, but we expect the benefits to materialise. Can you imagine what you and your viewers would be saying to me this morning if the BMA rejected this deal, went out on strike, cost the NHS £300 million, and the government said, oh, but we're still going to give them the benefits of the deal? You would think I had lost the plot. We are not going to do that.
I'm going to move on to other issues. Donald Trump is threatening to strike Iran's power infrastructure and bridges tonight if Iran doesn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Would you consider that to be a war crime?
There has not been a single day that has passed in this war with Iran where I have not felt that the Prime Minister has been entirely vindicated for his judgment in keeping Britain out of the war in Iran.
Would you consider it a war crime if Donald Trump were to carry out his threat?
As not my judgment to make, but it's for the US to justify its actions. The British government, the Prime Minister, has been clear that we would not get involved in this war in Iran. We wanted the diplomatic process that was well underway to be given more time. And there are very few British Prime Ministers alive today who I think would have shown the same level-headed judgment as our Prime Minister. We know that Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage would have jumped straight into this war with Iran because they told us. In fact, they criticised Keir Starmer for keeping us out because they were more interested in crawling up to Donald Trump than doing the right thing.
OK.
And then they came crawling right back again when they realised how unpopular it was, doing the kind of political equivalent of the hokey-cokey in the middle of an international crisis. Thank goodness we have a Prime Minister who shows much better judgment, level-headed reasoning, and has, I think, made a judgment many of his predecessors would not have done, for which he deserves enormous credit.
I've got to let you go in a minute, but I do want to ask you about Kanye West performing at the Wireless Festival. We understand that that situation is currently under review, whether or not he'll get permission to enter the country. What's your feeling? Should he be blocked from coming to the UK?
Oh, well, that's a decision for Home Office, and I'm not going to prejudice their decision about this case. What I would say is that Kanye West has no business headlining the Wireless Festival. I think organisers showed a terrible error of judgment in inviting him. These weren't a couple of off-colour remarks. These were, I think, a pattern of behaviour. The releasing of a song called Heil Hitler, the plastering of that slogan across T-shirts, then using bipolar disorder as an excuse, and then, when he realised the impact on his fame and his career, came out with a mealy-mouthed apologies, which has now been given a fig leaf of credibility by festival organisers who should be ashamed of themselves. So, look, I'm appalled, actually. You look at the context in which Kanye West operates. He's got enormous fame, enormous reach, and anti-Semitism, hatred against Jewish people in this country and elsewhere has been rising. And we've seen it manifesting itself not just through online behaviour, verbal abuse, but through physical attacks, including in Heaton Park in Manchester, where people died at the hands of that attack. We saw it more recently with an attack on a charity in North London, a Jewish charity that runs an ambulance service. Anti-Semitism is serious. It can be deadly, and people like Kanye West, who have an enormous platform, fame, reach, they have to accept the responsibility that comes with that, and I don't think he has, and I'm only too disappointed the festival organisers are too blind to see it.
West Treating, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Do stay with us. We've got lots more on that threat I was just talking about to Iran. He's got a final deadline for them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz at 1 a.m. But will things change before this evening? We're going to be speaking to former UK ambassador to Iran, Nicholas Hartson. That's coming up next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, thanks for staying with us. Now, time is ticking on Donald Trump's latest threat against Iran for them to open up the Strait of Hormuz or he'll blow up their bridges and power stations. The country rejected the latest ceasefire proposal. So what are the prospects for peace? And will the president's threat to make Iran hell come to pass? Well, let's speak to the former UK ambassador to Iran, Nicholas Hopton. Good morning, Ambassador. Thank you very much for being with us. Just want to start with the now repeated threat that we've had from President Donald J. Trump about blowing up Iranian power plants and Iranian bridges. Does that amount to a war crime in your assessment?
Well, I think Wes Streeting put it very well in your previous interview that that kind of judgment is for legal experts to make. What is clear is that the way this war has been conducted is very damaging not only to the combatants, particularly to the countries in the region and Iran who have lost thousands of people, many of them innocent civilians and children, but it's also been waged in a way that has seemed reckless at times and has led to the global economy feeling the force of that impact as far away as Chile. I was hearing yesterday where the other side of the world, petrol prices are being put up because directly of this war. Nobody is unaffected by this war, and this is a very important moment when the US president essentially has it in his gift to move the situation in a different way.
Well, yes, talk us through what a different way would be. Are there chances that some kind of a deal might be done before this deadline he's set that could prevent the US carrying out an attack like this?
Well, I would sincerely hope that careful consideration is taken by the White House as to the implications of carrying out the president's threat. There is a certain irony in a day when we're hearing about Artemis moon mission pushing the boundaries of human endeavour in a very positive way, further than ever before, using the most sophisticated United States technology. On the same day, the president is threatening to bomb the cradle of civilization, one of the cradles, Iran, back to the Stone Age. I think it is possible that a deal might emerge, but it will take time to work out what exactly that consists of. The elements are fairly clear, but the positions of the two parties are so far apart at this particular moment, has been the case since before the war, talking past each other essentially. But the elements of the deal are fairly clear, and not only are the talks going on in New York, which is welcome but unlikely to change the price of fish, as they say, and solve this, but there are, more importantly, I would say, are the movements, diplomatic efforts made by Pakistan and other countries in the region to broker an initial ceasefire they've offered, followed by talks and leading to a deal. The Iranians have rejected that, and I think that we shouldn't be surprised by that. They rejected it because they do not trust that if they agree to a ceasefire, the US won't hit them again, or Israel. And so a starting point for any talks must be agreement by the US, in Iranian eyes, that there will not be further attacks launched on them.
Perhaps because two sets of talks have broken up after the Iranians have been hit by Israel and then by the US in this latest round of the war. Mr. Hopton, talk to us about how the rhetoric that's surrounding this tense time we find ourselves in is not helping us come to ceasefire. I mean, one side will have to, if we're to avoid the US and Trump carrying out their threats. One side will have to back down at some point in the next few hours. We know what Trump has said. He seems to have backed himself into a corner. You know perhaps the Iranians better than many of us. What will they be thinking at this point? They're threatened to retaliate and set the region on fire. Do you think that's credible? Will they just look to push Trump right to the brink?
I think it's certainly credible that Iran will retaliate in ways that hits many countries, not just the US. As they have done since the start of this war, they've targeted US interests and US allies as a way of putting pressure on the White House. I think at the moment we're facing a potential lose-lose situation where if the US carries out the president's threat and escalates the war and the bombing and possibly even makes a ground invasion of some sort of Iranian territory, the Iranians will retaliate. And all of that will not lead to the Strait of Hormuz opening, and it will lead to a massive impact on the global economy, even bigger than we've seen already. Not to mention the regional security for countries in the Middle East. On the other hand, there is a more positive scenario, which I think if both sides could make the leap of imagination, where you could reach a more sustainable, lasting peace in the region. But that would entail huge compromises from both parts. The Americans would need to accept that, and Israel would need to accept that the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue to exist, as they still do, despite 5.5 weeks of heavy bombardment. And the Iranians would also need to make huge compromises, such as giving up any potential of having a nuclear weapon and possibly even civilian enrichment. And they would have to agree on a way of managing the Straits of Hormuz in future. And interestingly, of course, before the war started, the Straits of Hormuz was not in any way on the table as part of negotiations. Now it has to be, because Iran has shown that it has de facto control over traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. I think the Iranians will be ready to move in that direction. But as I say, I think they will only prepare to engage if they get some sort of cast iron guarantees that the US and Israel will not launch further attacks in the middle of negotiations, as they've done twice in the space of last year.
Well, Nicholas Hopton, former UK ambassador to Iran, we really appreciate your thoughts today. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Morning. Really interesting stuff there. We are in just a perilous time.
We are indeed, yes. Who knows what we'll be telling you tomorrow morning. We will wait and see. Yeah. Right now, though, we're going to take a bit of a pause and check on the weather, which I think is actually quite good news.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
It's looking more settled this week, as Anna just said, and it's going to be a bit warmer into Thursday. Yay! Southern parts are likely to see the highest temperature of the year so far today. Now, Britain looks mainly fine through the morning with long sunny spells, but the northwest of Scotland can expect some rain. Elsewhere, western parts of Ireland will turn wet, while Northern Ireland and the east of Ireland look cloudy. It's going to be warm, though, although quite breezy, and it'll be windy around many western coasts. Western parts of Northern Ireland and north of Scotland will see rain later on.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
I think we got a yay in the weather there.
It was mainly
I think that's
good,
a first. No, it was.
Sorry about the rain in Scotland and stuff, but, you know, used to that.
Poor old Scotland. Let's tell you what's coming up. We're going to be speaking to an astrophysics professor, Chris Lintott, about this morning's history-making milestone in the moon mission. That's coming up next.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching.
Tonight on The Wrap.
We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive data showing every Palestinian who has been killed in Gaza since the war began. Our analysis of this pattern in the killings suggests that entire families were wiped out in their homes or shelters. The data and forensics team is a multi-skilled unit dedicated to providing transparent journalism from Sky News. We located footage of the airdrop to a tent camp in central Gaza.
These airdrops are falling in extremely populated areas.
We combine traditional reporting with advanced analysis of satellite imagery, social media, and other open source information. Now, this is just one of the strikes and incidents we've been able to geolocate across Gaza. Sky News has found Nazi speeches and marching music have been used as background sound on tens of thousands of TikTok videos as far-right groups try and spread their message. Sky News has seen 72,000 posts used in this way. There's no evidence yet of foul play at Heathrow. It shows weaknesses that enemies could take advantage of. Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. Supporters say it saves lives and projects American power and influence.
I think we would generally be called far right, sure.
It's called Return to the Land, and they invited me in.
A lot of people are going to be, why are you making Nazi references? Right. Well, why wouldn't I?
Its founder says he is building a fortress for the white race.
It's a racial association. I kind of want to ask you, after seeing this, do you think what we're doing is immoral?
We followed a social media trail that led us to Bristol, where a confrontation between protesters erupted into a full-scale riot.
Here it really is pitched battle skirmishes, hurling missiles, throwing punches.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Right, thanks for staying with us. A bit of breaking news to bring you now concerning the Wireless Festival this summer in London. Kanye West books to headline all 3 nights, and that is despite of his history of anti-Semitism and the complaints from the Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, other politicians, as well as many Jewish groups in the UK, saying that he should not be allowed to come. Now, in the last few minutes, we've heard from Kanye West, who's put out a statement.
Yeah, I'll read it to you right now. It's addressed to those I've hurt. And it says, I've been following the conversation around wireless and want to address it directly. My only goal is to come to London and present a show of change, bring unity, peace and love through music. He goes on, I would be grateful for the opportunity to meet with members of the Jewish community in the UK in person to listen. I know words aren't enough. I've had to show change through my actions. If you're open, I'm here with love.
Right.
So Kanye West putting out that statement in the last few minutes. Obviously, clearly determined still to come to London and perform at Wireless, where he's booked a headline all 3 nights. Let's bring in Molly Malone, who's been following this for us. Hi there, Molly. So no backing down by Kanye West?
No, but making sort of, I guess, a call to action to meet with the Jewish community should they want to meet with him. But judging by the statements that we've had from, for example, the Board of Deputies of British Jews in recent days, we had overnight the statement from the organiser asking people for forgiveness and asking people to sort of reconsider their disgust at not wanting him initially to headline the festival. And in response, we then had the Board of Deputies saying, that's not going to reassure us. We've had previous apologies from Kanye West over the years. He was then seen to backtrack on them. And actually, in the words of them saying, his invective was directed over a much longer period than his more recent apology. It's time for Wireless to do the decent thing and rescind that invitation. So I guess that's them reflecting on the fact that previous apologies have come in the past, but still not feeling comfortable and actually feeling that his remarks and anti-Semitic comments over a number of years, he's known for having said them over a number of years, those apologies sort of don't make up for that. So it remains, I guess, to be seen with this new apology whether that makes him feel any different. Kanye West saying that he's happy to meet with members of the Jewish community in the UK in person, although recognising, I know words aren't enough. I'll have to show change through my actions. So I guess that's recognising the fact that he said words in the past, but that's not been enough for the Jewish community. Perhaps it might be this time. We wait to see, I suppose, their reaction to the latest apology.
Yeah, and interesting that he's asked to try and speak to people to explain himself, because obviously he spoke to the person who was putting on Wireless, Melvin Ben, who, a few hours ago put out his own statement, kind of reiterating and sort of echoing what Kanye had to say later, that, you know, he's spoken to Kanye, he believes in forgiveness, he hopes that people can change, he thinks that people can be given a second chance is a lost virtue. So he's obviously, Kanye has not been persuaded by the outrage to try and step away from it at all, has he? He wants now to have this conversation. And now it becomes sort of almost like a moral thing where we're going to start having Kanye speaking to people from the Board of Deputies, from the Community Security Trust, potentially talking about whether or not he has changed enough.
Yeah, and all of these developments are coming quite quickly, aren't they? And yet at the same time, you've got tickets going on sale in the next few hours. They haven't got any other acts at the moment. Kanye West is the headline act for 3 days. So they're going to have to make some fairly big decisions, I think, probably quite quickly, because things are moving at pace.
Well, that's a big question, that the sponsors pulling out and disassociating themselves with the festival. I mean, that could be a big problem, couldn't it, for festival organisers? Could that force them to change their minds?
Yeah, because we know that with these festivals, they rely heavily on the sponsorship. I mean, you've got ticket sales, but then after that, sponsorship is the next biggest revenue, the next biggest source of income. And pretty much I think we're waiting on one of the partners to make a decision either way, but the rest of them have withdrawn their sponsorship. So that's got to be playing on their mind, although Ben's statement, Melvin Ben's statement, came after all of that. So it sort of begs the question, do they have another plan? What's their alternative? Are they just sort of committing to the fact that they've signed him as the headline, the only act at the moment for those 3 days, 150,000 people? What are they going to do, knowing that they still don't have that sponsorship money?
And it could, at this stage, it could all be taken out of Melvin Ben and Kanye West's hands, because the government might have something to do with it, the visa situation. We heard from West Street, you spoke to him a while ago, he said he doesn't want to get ahead of the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who will end up making the decision once there is an application for a decision to be made by that. But he made it quite clear. He doesn't think that Kanye should have been booked in the first place, doesn't think he should come at all, and then pointed out the rising levels of anti-Semitism around the country.
Yeah, he seemed appalled at the prospect of the organisers inviting him to do so in the first place. But there is this move that's available to the Home Office, and it's actually something that Australia did last year. They blocked Kanye West from going to Australia after he released that song glorifying Adolf Hitler. So it's something that is available to the UK, West Streeting not making a direct comment, but actually it's almost gone above sort of cabinet ministers as well, because the Prime Minister has commented on it. So lots of considerations, I'm sure, will get a sort of decision in the coming days.
Yeah, and lots more reaction, no doubt. Molly, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Molly.
Well, let's get more now on the impact of the war in the Middle East. The conflict has led to rising fuel prices across the US, impacting voters in the traditionally Republican state of Florida.
Yeah, prices of gas have risen to over $4 a gallon, and it's something President Trump may pay for at the midterms. Our US correspondent James Matthews has this.
Who's paying for this war in Iran? You are.
Gas prices crossed $4 a gallon on average.
I was paying $2.87. We're probably going to be close to like $4.50.
Drivers feeling the pain.
Who do you blame for that?
The president. He's the man in charge. He's the one who's to blame.
Gas prices will rapidly come back down.
I still support him. Stand by that. Yes, I do. Here in America, the politics of war are playing out at the petrol pump. The choke on the Strait of Hormuz, that's touching all of our lives, touching like a vice-like grip. How much has your fuel bill gone up?
This is about 60%. Yeah.
I was paying, $80 normally, and that has just skyrocketed up to like $115, and that's just insanity.
Look at that, $4.29. Life is already high as it is. Groceries high. Everything just high.
I'm a little worried because, obviously, we get paid by, traveling, doing all that. So if prices go up, I'm not really sure how that's going to go downstream to the drivers and, affect companies.
Donald Trump speaks of a short-term increase in prices at the pumps that will come down after the end of conflict. But many analysts are less optimistic. They warn of a longer-term pain. Disruption that could last, they say, for several years.
It's going to take months at a minimum, and in some cases years, to repair the damage, the physical damage that's been done to infrastructure in the region. And that could spell more turbulence in the markets moving forward.
Did he make the right call on Iran, Donald Trump?
Tough to tell. You know, I think politicians know a lot more than we average people know.
Where do you think it might all end?
I don't know. It's absolutely terrifying. I think that this was beyond what I was afraid of in the first place, and I think it's very concerning.
I've been through Iraq and Afghanistan, and I see the oppression over there of the people, and if I was them, I'd want somebody to come over and help me out too. So I understand why Israel and the United States are doing what they're doing.
With oil at more than $100 a barrel, that's increased the cost of air travel too. Jet fuel has more than doubled in price. Airlines have now begun to increase fares and fees. Throw in uncertainty in the markets, and it's causing political difficulty for Donald Trump. He's on his lowest approval ratings of his second term, around the kind of territory that Jimmy Carter occupied during the height of the Iran hostage crisis in the 80s.
May God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much and good night.
The president has a considerable stake in the course of this conflict. So do we.
We're going to get plenty more reaction, market reaction and the impact on the economy from the continued closure of the Straits of Hormuz a little bit later in the programme.
Now, the Artemis II crew survived another test, losing contact with everyone on Earth for about 40 minutes as they passed behind the moon.
Yeah, and they're now more than halfway through their mission. Let's speak now to Professor of Astrophysics at the University of Oxford, Chris Lintott. Very good morning again to you, Chris. And I'll come on to the fact that they went out of contact for 40 minutes in a moment. But first, let's just mark this extraordinary record that they set early evening yesterday, our time, when they became the 4 humans to go the furthest than anyone else from the Earth. What do you make of that?
Well, it was a spectacular moment, and I like the fact that they immediately challenged generations that came after them to make sure that the record didn't stand as long as the previous one had. There's this real sense that the astronauts at least want Artemis to be the first of many missions to explore this part of space. I spent all of yesterday just listening to them looking at the moon. The joy and the enthusiasm for where they were was infectious. And this shot that you're showing now, just as the Earth disappeared behind the moon, they disappeared behind the moon from our perspective, stopped me in my tracks. I think this is one of the iconic images of the space age and really illustrates that they're somewhere that we haven't been before.
Yeah, it's just an extraordinary image. And it wasn't. They also got to see a solar eclipse as well while they're up there, which was a special treat for all of them. And you mentioned, Professor, as the fact that you wanted to hear their reflections when they came back because of, you know, the human eye and how it picks up things that are different to how a camera picks things up. What did you make of what they said when they came back round?
Well, I think there are 2 sets of observations. So they're doing scientific observations that have been planned by the team. It's sort of like being a field geologist dropped in a new site. So they were talking about the colours of what they were seeing and the sort of their perspectives and some of these structures that haven't been seen up close by people before. For me, I think it's about almost an artistic response. We've put people in a place they've never been before. And so it was interesting to hear them talking about sort of how rugged the terrain looks and how they were using the cameras that they've got with them, which are sensitive to low light, to choose what to take pictures of. Lots of those pictures have been sent down to Earth overnight. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what they saw and I guess looking through the best album of holiday pictures ever taken.
How much do we know about the far side of the moon? I mean, so few humans have seen it, but do we know if it's particularly different from the side that we see regularly?
Well, that's what's interesting about it. We know lots about it because, of course, we've had lots of robotic exploration before and after the Apollo mission. So the science is done with robots these days. But the far side of the moon looks very different. You can see on the left here, there's an area that doesn't have these big seas, these dark areas, these lava plains that we're so used to seeing when you look at the moon from here. And this was a shock when we got the first images of the far side. It's actually a scientific mystery as to why the 2 halves of the moon are so different. Some think it's maybe the influence of the Earth's gravity on the forming moon. Others think that the moon perhaps suffered an impact maybe 3 billion years ago. So by looking at the moon and understanding why it's got these two different faces, we can read off the history of the solar system. That's the scientific excitement of this. But it did make for a very striking shot as the astronauts traversed around the far side yesterday. You could see the changing picture of the moon and see how different it is from the familiar view that we get down here on Earth.
I mean, I've loads of times, Professor, but I guess they're on their way back now. I jokingly said earlier, is it like when you finish your holiday and you're on your way back? I'm sure there's lots of science for them to do, though, as they make their way back to Earth.
They've actually got a day off, which is nice. They've sort of to relax at the end of the holiday, go through what happened yesterday. It's a fairly terrifying end to the trip, though. The scary part of the mission is still to come. They're going to hit the top of the Earth's atmosphere in a few days' time at about 25,000 miles an hour, faster than anyone ever has. And that's the risky bit of the mission. So we'll just have to keep fingers crossed that all goes well for the next few days.
So, well, Professor, thank you.
Thanks, Chris Lintott. We appreciate it. And stay with us. We've got the top stories coming up next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. You're watching Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Houston, integrity, comm check.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
The Artemis II crew back in range after travelling the furthest from Earth than any humans have ever done before.
Donald Trump threatens to obliterate Iran in 4 hours tonight unless a deal is reached to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Kanye West offers to meet members of the UK's Jewish community as the Boss of Wireless Festival defends booking the rapper as a headliner.
Also coming up later on this morning, we're going to hear from the star of Line of Duty, Vicky McClure, and her actor and producer partner, Johnny Owen, about their new show exploring the murders that changed the nation.
Plus, a 6-day doctor strike begins this morning. The NHS urges patients to keep their appointments.
Hello there, good morning. Thank you for being with us. We're going to begin this hour with some good, inspirational news. Humans have now travelled further from Earth than at any point in history.
Yeah, the crew of Artemis II reached more than 250,000 miles from our planet as they completed an unprecedented flyby around the far side of the moon.
Yeah, they lost comms to mission control and were totally cut off from everyone on Earth for 40 minutes while they were behind the moon. They then re-emerged, got to see a solar eclipse, becoming the first people to ever witness an eclipse from space. They described that as indescribable.
And as if that wasn't enough, they also received a call of congratulation from Donald Trump. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports.
It's all of humankind in one grainy picture. Orion's 4 crew further from home than anyone in history. The other 8 billion of us on the crescent Earth in the blackness beyond. The last image from the spacecraft before it looped behind the moon, blocking contact with Earth, and a final message from the crew.
To all of you down there on Earth and around Earth, we love you from the moon.
Houston copies. We'll see you on the other side.
40 minutes later, they were back.
Integrity, comm check.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
Sunlight flooding the capsule as it came round the far side of the moon. If it was a tense moment, it didn't show. But this was already a day of spacefaring and scientific firsts.
This is the iconic, the historic mission control at Houston, where they're controlling the whole of the Artemis operations. Come and take a look.
We'd arrived just in time for the longest distance wake-up call in history.
Hello, Artemis II. This is Apollo astronaut Jim Lovell. Welcome to my old neighborhood. It's a historic day, and I know how busy you'll be, but don't forget to enjoy the view.
Well, it's amazing. It's a voice from the past, from the iconic Apollo era, Jim Lovell there, waking up the crew and wishing them good luck with today's most important day of the mission so far.
A few hours later, Orion's crew had flown further than anyone before and into the space history books.
Over 55 years ago, Lovell, Swigert, and Hayes flew 248,655 statute miles away from Earth. Today, for all humanity, you're pushing beyond that frontier.
To mark the moment, the crew named a crater on the moon after their spacecraft Integrity and another in memory of Commander Reed Wiseman's wife, who died of cancer 6 years ago.
And so we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol. The spouse of Reed, the mother of Katie and Ellie. And if you want to find this one, you look at Glushko, and it's just to the northwest of that, at the same latitude as Ohm, and it's a bright spot on the moon. And we would like to call it Carol, and you spell that C-A-R-R-O-L-L.
The crew took a moment to wipe the tears from their eyes as it was time to train them on the moon and make detailed observations for scientists back on Earth.
Human eyes are just different than cameras. They see things in a different way. They're really good at picking up things like subtle color differences, subtle textural differences. I'm actually more excited to hear from them, to hear their words, than I am to see the pictures they're taking.
There's just a lot of texture that just pops right out at you when you can zoom in. A third of the way up from the southernmost part of the Terminator looked like a dinosaur print. If one was running to the northwest, now is clearly a crater with a bunch of craters around it.
Then, after their flyby, an unexpected call from President Trump, who until now had been conspicuously silent about America's success with Artemis.
It's an honor to speak to you, and I wanted to congratulate each and every one of you.
and tell me what is the most unforgettable part of this really historic day. The whole world is watching and listening. Please tell me.
Mr. President, to be here with you speaking about our incredible day today. I think one of the biggest highlights was coming back from the far side of the moon and having the first glimpses of planet Earth again.
Their time at the moon is dictated by forces beyond their control. It's gravity now turning their spacecraft around. But it treated them to one last spectacle, an eclipse of the sun, before swinging them back towards Earth and home.
Well, earlier Tom reflected on the feeling today as NASA's mission control in Houston in Texas.
I mean, what a day. I can't tell you how lucky I feel to have been here on this really historic moment in the history of spaceflight. It was, you know, and you really got a sense of excitement here. I mean, I hesitate to say this, but they're over the moon. And because, you know, there was a lot of doubt about getting this spacecraft off the ground, multiple delays to this expensive, over-budget mission. And they've got them there, they've got them around the moon. Lots of milestones to come, and it's no mean feat doing the re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere and landing them safely. The administrator of NASA saying, you know, he's not going to judge this mission a success till they're safely under the parachutes coming back to the Pacific Ocean 5 days from now. But the fact that they achieved this moment, the spacecraft is working well, and they've also succeeded. We haven't seen the pictures yet. They're downloading them now overnight here in the US to give them over to the scientists. But there's hopefully a lot they can learn by having human eyes. And in some parts of the moon, they will have been the first human eyes ever to have seen them, describe those features, photograph them, annotate them. And that will help inform just general science about how our solar system came to be, but also pave the way and inform future missions. Because remember, this is a test flight or at the beginning of a very big program that NASA plans to conduct to land humans on the moon in a couple of years' time and start building a moon base there and occupying the south pole of the moon for into the 2030s.
Well, let's get more on this. Mickey Carroll is here with us. Hi there, Mickey.
Well, Mickey.
I mean, they've had an extraordinary, probably just over 12 hours, breaking the record, the furthest that humans have ever gone. They had that 40 minutes where they lost contact with mission control, and they've seen a solar eclipse. I mean, it's been quite a time.
I know. Can you imagine being that crew up there and then they get a call from the president as well? I mean, it's been, like you say, a huge 12 hours, and he described them as modern-day pioneers, which I think is really accurate. They've done things that no human has ever done before. And while he was on the phone to them, he asked them what their most kind of memorable moment was. And one that really stuck out for me was Reed Wiseman saying that he's seen things now that no human has seen. And that's what's really stood out for me. Over the last since 7 p.m. last night when they first broke that record, everything about this has been so human. Yeah. They've managed to do things because they're kind of humans up there rather than robots. Their eyes are so much more complex than any camera that we've got here on Earth. And so that's what's really brought this to life. So NASA asked them to be really descriptive when they were looking at things like those aspects of the dark side of the moon, the far side of the moon that no human's seen before. They wanted them to be as sort of poetic as possible. And one thing that I really liked was Christina Koch was looking at the some very bright little craters that were in the moon and described it as looking like a lampshade with tiny pinpricks in it. And it's not scientific language at all, but for the people back on Earth and the scientists who want to learn about the moon so we can do things like establish a lunar base up there, those descriptions will be really important to help them understand that environment that we've just never seen and we just don't understand. So that's been really kind of key for me. And then seeing their reaction to the solar eclipse as well. Again, that's something that no human has ever seen before. And their descriptions of that and their ability to kind of send those descriptions back home is really important and really key, and why things like Artemis II are so important for human evolution in space.
I know, I absolutely agree with you. And I love the fact that Victor Glover at one point said there were no adjectives to describe what they'd observed, but they're doing a pretty good job, aren't they? Thanks,
Mickey. Thank you for that. And we're going to have a special programme all about the Artemis mission at 9:30 here on Sky News Mornings.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the US-Israel war on Iran. And Donald Trump has threatened to obliterate Iran in one night unless the Strait of Hormuz is reopened in a few hours' time.
Yeah, Trump says that Tehran has until 1 a.m. UK time to comply with his deadline, or the US will destroy every major bridge and every power plant and face what he's called living in hell. Now, if he does go ahead, that would amount to a series of war crimes and drive up energy prices yet again. Here he is making the threat at the White House yesterday.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to. We don't want that to happen.
Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. So, Sally, no sense that Donald Trump is backing away from his threat. Iran have threatened to retaliate too. So how is that being received there?
Yeah, it seems deadline day is finally here. Donald Trump moved the date twice. It seems he really didn't want to get to this point, but here we are. The Iranians and the Americans have not been able to strike any sort of deal, find any sort of off-ramp. So the clock is ticking for Donald Trump's deadline, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight, 4 a.m. tomorrow in the UAE. And as you say, 1 a.m. if you're in the UK. We don't know yet what this means, but if you listen to the rhetoric and the threats from both sides, it's extremely unnerving. And I think a lot of people in this region will be hoping that this is a taco moment. Trump always chickens out. We'll just have to wait and see. But when you hear the President of the United States saying that they are going to take out an entire country in one night, and you've got an Iranian official on the other hand calling on the country's young people to form human chains around power plants to protect them, it certainly tells you that this war is potentially entering a dangerous new phase. The question is just, what does this mean and how much worse are things going to get? Well, Iran has already said, if you strike our power plants, we will retaliate and hit critical domestic infrastructure in the region, including potentially desalination plants, which this region is hugely reliant on for drinking water. 42% of the drinking water in the UAE comes from desalination plants, but that climbs to as high as 90% for the likes of Kuwait. And we've seen 2 oil refineries hit in Kuwait and Bahrain in the last few days, a petrochemical facility in Abu Dhabi. The extent of the damage isn't clear, but the question is, are we going to see more of that? And just how much worse are things going to get? And of course, this all centres around the Strait of Hormuz. It was never a war goal at the start of this war, but it's become the defining issue that Donald Trump simply cannot resolve at the moment. And it's proving extremely powerful for Iran. They have enormous leverage at the moment for as long as they make it too dangerous for commercial shipping to pass the Strait of Hormuz, inflicting widespread damage on the world economy and on energy supplies. Now, they have said, we are not going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz if we do not have a cast iron guarantee that you are not going to attack us again. They have been in negotiations with the US twice now in the last year, which have resulted in Israel and the US attacking them in the 12-day war last year and again in the war that we're seeing now. There is zero trust between Tehran and Washington, and Tehran is appearing vengeful and emboldened since they've managed to inflict such widespread pain in the course of this war in the last 5 weeks. So we don't know how this is all going to play out, but it doesn't feel like it's moving in a very good direction. And certainly, you know, both sides are still trying to peddle the narrative that they're winning this war. But if we see critical domestic infrastructure targeted in Iran or in neighbouring countries like Gulf states, which could constitute war crimes, it'll be very hard for anyone to dress up this war as any sort of success. And we've got less than 24 hours before we find out what this deadline truly means.
Yeah, that's so true. Sally, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Now, Kanye West has offered to meet with the British Jewish community ahead of turning up in London for the Wireless Festival later in the summer.
Yeah, it's after the boss of the festival defended booking the rapper as the headline act and asked the public to forgive him for anti-Semitic remarks he's made in the past. Well, let's hear a little bit more about this with our correspondent Molly Malone, because, Molly, in the last hour, Kanye West himself has put out a statement, hasn't he?
Yeah, there's been kind of quite a lot of developments coming quite quickly. The crux of what's happening is basically about a week ago, Kanye West, it was announced that he'd headline Wireless Festival in July, performing to 150,000 people over the course of 3 days. There was a significant backlash from Jewish groups, from politicians and, crucially, from sponsors of the festival, Diageo and Pepsi, both pulling out over the weekend. And this is all in response to the numerous anti-Semitic remarks that we've heard from Kanye West over a period of a number of years, really. People will remember, but he released a song called Heil Hitler. He sold T-shirts with swastikas on them. So there was lots of outrage and upset from people. Now, in the last few minutes, we've had a new statement from Kanye West responding to the upset that we've seen play out over the last few days, and it's addressed to those I've hurt. I've been following the conversation around wireless and want to address it directly. My only goal is to come to London and present a show of change, bringing unity, peace and love through music. I would be grateful for the opportunity to meet with members of the Jewish community in the UK in person to listen. I know words aren't enough. I have to show change through my actions. If you're open, I'm here. So almost a bit of a call to action, presenting the opportunity to meet with members of the Jewish community. And as you say, that came after overnight we had a statement from Melvin Benn, the organiser of Wireless, effectively defending their decision, saying, look, people have another chance. He's made mistakes in the past, but, you know, consider reflecting on your disgust. I have, and sort of asking the Jewish community to do that, and also saying, you know, his songs are on the radio, trust him to perform, essentially. But that wasn't enough to reassure the community, because quite quickly we had another statement from a man called Phil Rosenberg, who's at the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I'll read you that. He said, Melvin Benn's statement will not reassure many within the Jewish or other communities against whom Kanye West's invective was directed over a much longer period than his more recent apology. It is time for Wireless to do the decent thing and rescind an invitation they should never have offered. Kanye West may well be on the path to health and healing. We sincerely hope that he is. But the space to test this is not over 3 days on the Wireless main stage.
Well, look, so that's the artists, that's the group that put on those who are against it. What do the government have to say about this? Because they've got some agency in this, haven't they?
Yeah, so kind of like we were saying before, this could, in a way, be taken out of Wireless's hands altogether, because we also understand that the government are reviewing his ability to come to the UK and looking at his permission to enter the UK, and that's a decision with the Home Office. And actually, that is a measure that's been taken by other countries. We saw Australia do it last year. They blocked him from going there after he released that song glorifying Adolf Hitler. And it's something that you put to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, as well, who seemed appalled at the very idea of inviting him here to perform. I think we can hear a clip.
Kanye West has no business headlining the Wireless Festival. I think organisers showed a terrible error of judgment in inviting him. These weren't a couple of off-colour remarks. These were, I think, a pattern of behaviour. The releasing of a song called Heil Hitler, the plastering of that slogan across T-shirts, then using bipolar disorder as an excuse, and then when he realised the impact on his fame and his career, came out with a mealy-mouthed apologies, which has now been given a fig leaf of credibility by festival organisers who should be ashamed of themselves. So, look, I'm appalled, actually.
So him, you know, not mincing his words there, pretty appalled at the decision to invite him in the first place. And I think some of what he had to say there, Wes Streeting, will find sympathy with many in the Jewish community, because Kanye West has apologised before. He apologised in January, he apologised in previous years as well, but then was seen to sort of backtrack on that and go back on his previous apologies. This time he's inviting people to meet with him and hoping to sort of come to London in July to perform, but some big decisions clearly are going to need to be made quite quickly, not least because we've got tickets going on sale in the next few hours.
Yeah, indeed. Molly, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for that. All right, now, resident doctors are on strike right now in their ongoing disputes with the government over pay and conditions.
Yeah, NHS England is urging patients to seek the care they need regardless. And earlier, we're going to hear from Wes Streeting again, the Health Secretary, because he said the government will mitigate against the impact of the industrial action.
resident doctors have been the standout winners of the entire public sector, and they've still gone on strike.
Are you prepared just to ride out these strikes? This is the 15th since 2023.
Yes, we will mitigate against strike action.
Well, let's bring in Ashish Joshi, who's in central London for us now, where strikes are taking place, of course. So, Ashish, the Health Secretary really standing firm, saying there's no more money for these striking resident doctors. What's the reaction there?
Well, we'll get the reaction to what West Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said from the BMA Resident Association's committee, member Jack Fletcher. We'll talk to Jack in a second. 15th round of action, 2023. This just doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. I mean, it's long, it's protracted, patients are suffering. How are you going to fix this, Dr. Fletcher? Well, I mean, you've heard what West Streeting had to say this morning. He's disappointed. He says you're going to cost the NHS £300 million, and he's offered you more money than any other public sector worker. So he's clearly very angry and very upset. What have you got to say to that?
So, you know, this round of industrial action was entirely avoidable, and it was in the gift of the Health Secretary to avoid this action entirely. We thought that we were actually on course to a way out of this, and we were in good faith, and we thought the government were negotiating in good faith over the course of the last 8 weeks. And then right at the last minute, the government chose to reduce the investment on the table and then stretch it over a number of years and call that their best and final offer. That would have essentially meant real terms pay cuts baked in for not just this year, but also for potentially the next few years as well. That's why we're back here today. We gave the government several opportunities to reconsider, and they chose to decline those opportunities. They did not issue a better offer, and that's why we felt like we had no choice but to announce industrial action. We gave them further opportunities, and they didn't produce a better offer. That's why we're stood here today on a picket line.
Do you accept you're getting more than any other public sector worker? Do you accept that it's almost 30%, so it's higher than anyone else is getting? Surely that's a good place to start and move forward, call off the industrial action and keep negotiations on in the background.
So, you know, we entirely agree that it's a good start to reversing that decade plus of pay erosion. And I think it's also worth recognising that doctors have faced the largest pay erosion in the public sector for well over a decade, between 2008 and 2024. So we are already starting from a lower baseline compared to the vast majority, if not all, of the rest of the public sector and the private sector as well. So yes, we do recognise that the pay deal in 2024 was a good start. However, what we are asking for is just a continuation of that journey in a realistic and reasonable way. Nobody's asking for anything overnight. Nobody's asking for anything in one go. Neither I nor my colleagues are asking for that. All we're asking for is to avoid further real terms pay cuts and to restore that lost value, not just in one go, but over a number of years. We're happy to negotiate that. We thought we were negotiating that. We came to the talks in good faith. We spent 8 weeks without calling any action whatsoever. And then right at the last minute, like I say, the government chose to reduce the value of that investment and then stretch it over a number of years. I don't think it's fair to ask doctors to bake in further real terms pay cuts, particularly at a time when we don't have enough doctors. We see doctors leaving the NHS. There are doctors here this morning who have left the NHS because they don't feel valued. And yet we've got a health secretary who's asking us essentially to bake in more real terms pay cuts, what are looking likely to be, rather than getting around the table and offering what we were talking about a few weeks ago and shifting the goalposts at the last minute.
Dr. Fletcher, we've run out of time, but just a quick yes or no. Are talks between the BMA and the government continuing while this strike action continues? Are you continuing to try and find a way out of this mess?
The government refused to negotiate with strike action called. I am more than willing to meet the government at any time, either today, tomorrow, during the strike action and after the strike action to negotiate.
So that's a no. You're not talking to the government at the moment?
The government will not talk to us.
OK, well, there you are. Look, 6 days of strike action beginning today. The advice from NHS England bosses is for any patients who have appointments, attend those appointments. And if you're sick and you need critical care, go to a hospital irrespective of the strike action, because the hospitals will be open to see you.
All right, Ashish, for now, thank you so much for that. Of course, more from Ashish and team as that strike gets underway today. Stay with us here on Mornings. Coming up next, I'm going to speak to the Reform Home Affairs spokesperson, Zee Youssef, about strikes and other matters of the day.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
So Donald Trump says he will obliterate Iran tonight unless it reopens the Strait of Hormuz and makes an acceptable deal.
Yeah, he's issued the warning to Tehran, but it's unclear exactly which conditions Iran needs to make before the deadline, which is at 8 p.m. Eastern US time tonight. Let's bring in our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark, for a bit more on this. Professor Clark, morning to you. Great to see you again. So look, we're now in the TikTok, aren't we? Because the Iranians have essentially rejected any ceasefire that I think we talked about yesterday.
Similar rhetoric to his.
Right.
So they're matching his rhetoric with similar apocalyptic rhetoric of the retaliation, which they say will be terrible.
So everyone's kind of backed into a corner. What's the off-ramp of this?
The off-ramp, I think, would be President Trump saying, there's been enough progress in talks, not really talks, they're exchanges of ideas, but there's been enough progress, I'll hold off for another 48 hours and we'll see where we go. That would be one possibility. Another possibility would be a series of American strikes which are not this 4-hour demolition job on civil society in Iran, all the bridges, all the power stations, which he's been threatening. And there are a series of strikes, and then he says, see what we can do, now let's keep on talking. Those are the only two off-ramps I can think of. The other thing is that in the past, when the Americans, or under Trump anyway, when they've assembled this sort of force in the region, they've tended to use it. And there's a lot of force there now, a lot of American force at sea. Most of the ground troops that they might use for something or other in the Gulf are there. And the record so far is that he normally presses the go button rather than the go home button. So we'll see where we are.
So what would that mean if you did press the go button to use
it would mean that the beginning of these strategic strikes, and maybe immediately, maybe in a couple of days' time, some ground operations. And the argument is, well, maybe against Kharg Island, which would be a bargaining chip, maybe against Larak, which is in the Gulf itself, which is the toll booth that the Iranians are operating. They're making ships go north around this tiny Larak Island, and that is literally the toll booth where they can have a look at the ships. They're paying them $2 million to get through, reportedly. So they might do something like that. But again, a ground operation would not change anything fundamentally. It would just be a ground operation to try and improve America's tactical position. But strategically, the US is kind of out of options now, unless the Iranians somehow are prepared to negotiate.
And you said that the Iranians have matched Trump, sort of rhetorically at least, this idea of destruction.
Yeah.
Do we think they've been launching missiles overnight? Do we think that they have the capacity to do what they're
they've got a fair few left. I mean, the view in general, the intelligence view, and this is from both Israeli and US intelligence, not through the White House. It's typical intelligence, 30-30-30. But we're sure that 30% have been destroyed of Iran's missiles. Another 30% we're not sure about, that they might have been disabled, and 30% we just don't know.
Right.
Intelligence always gives you 30-30-30. It's safe for them. And other estimates have said, well, if we assume that the 30% we don't know about and the 30% that they're not entirely destroyed, let's assume 50%. And that's a sort of a break-even figure. Let's assume they've got 50%. 50% of what? So what did they start with? They seem to have started with something between 3,000 and maybe 5,000 missiles, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. So let's assume even 30% of that, but 50% of that, might be, 1,000, 1,500 missiles left, plus several thousands of drones. They had several 100,000 drones, and they've been building more while the conflict has gone on, and they've been creating rocket fuel. We're just talking off camera that 3 shiploads of rocket fuel from China, or precursors for rocket fuel, arrived last week. it was Chinese consignment on Iranian ships. So they're still building. So we have to assume that the Iranians have got, let's say, something more than 1,000 missiles, if they've still got the launchers, and they've still got some, and they're building more, and they've got multiple thousands of drones. And they've learned, thanks to the Russians and the Chinese, how to use their drones and missiles most effectively. The Russians have been helping them with quite a lot of targeting. So you have to assume that the Iranians are capable of some pretty big strategic strikes on their Gulf neighbours in retaliation for what President Trump is threatening tomorrow.
And that would be desalination plants, it would be the oil facilities, it would really be this thing that kind of completely reduces the...
Yeah, there's three types of target. Oil facilities are the obvious one, and that's already been hit. They can be repaired, and there's plenty of oil around in general. But the two that are much more sensitive, LNG, liquefied natural gas, because LNG facilities can't be repaired quickly. Right. And the Ras Laffan facility that was hit on the 19th of March by the Iranians in retaliation for an Israeli attack on South Pars, that is partially out of action for years now. And so LNG facilities can't be repaired quickly. And desalination is a disaster because all of the Gulf societies are fundamentally dependent on desalinated water. And the desalination plants, you look at a map, they're all, by definition, they're all along the coast. Yep. They're all vulnerable. They've never thought they needed to defend them in the past, and there's lots of them. And without desalinated water, it isn't just drinking water, those societies simply can't operate. So LNG and desalination are the two types of targets that would do real lasting damage to all the Gulf states.
So a huge amount at stake.
Yes.
Donald Trump held a lengthy news conference last night. One of the things he said was that if it were up to him, he'd go in and take the oil. But he said, unfortunately, the American people would like us to come home.
Yes.
Can we pick up any clues from that? Is he looking for a way out when he says the American people want us to come home?
I'm sure he is. I mean, it's a ridiculous statement. I mean, it shows he doesn't understand anything about politics or
the idea that he could go in and
or the ownership of oil, for that matter. And forget about that side of it, but you're absolutely right, Anna. In saying the American people want something that I don't want, that's one way in which he can give himself a climb down, to say, you know, I was ready, I was going to create this victory, but you know, the American people aren't quite brave enough to back me on it. And that's one possibility of a way out. He must be, for all of his rhetoric, he must be looking for a way out in the next 24 hours. There must be a voice on his shoulder which says, Donald, this could go terribly, terribly wrong. And this, Donald, will be your legacy in history. All the other things you think you've created will be as nothing if you go down as the man who ran a ridiculous war for personal vanity that went terribly, terribly wrong. That will be your legacy. All he worries about now is what history will say about him.
Michael, just a final thought then, we don't have loads of time, but on the potential conflict that's coming if Donald Trump does put this order into action between the Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump, and his Chief of Staff, Chief of the Armed Forces, General Kane, because they will be liable for anything that happens if it is a war crime that's ordered.
Yeah, Dan Kane. I mean, the word is that the Dan Kane is pushing against a lot of these statements that President Trump is making, and that he keeps making the point to him is that, you know, Mr. President, I cannot order our armed service personnel to commit acts which will be regarded as war crimes. I can't do it. No chiefs of staff could do it. I mean, British chiefs of staff said the same in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. They said, you know, I will not issue orders that will be judged illegal. I cannot do it. Now, Dan Kane is apparently saying that to the White House, and the White House is absorbing that, but is it going to make any difference? We don't know. So there may be a big moral issue here, and there's certainly a weight of discussion in the United States saying that, you know, the US, of all powers, the US should not commit acts which will be interpreted as war crimes. I mean, something is only a war crime if it's judged to be so in some sort of tribunal, which will never take place. But popular opinion in the world may judge that this is a war crime. I mean, nobody will ever be in front of a jury for it. But if popular opinion thinks this is a war crime, then that would be the legacy that President Trump would carry forward.
OK. Michael, as ever, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Scott, thank you for that. All right, let's bring in Zia Youssef now, the Reform Home Affairs spokesperson. Good morning to you, Zia Youssef. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm going to start, actually, if you don't mind, with what we were just discussing there in the situation in the Middle East. And that final point, Donald Trump seemingly being about to order what would amount, in many people's estimation, to war crimes of the bombing of Iranian bridges and power plants. What's your sense of what should be done, could be done, to stop that from happening?
Well, I think, look, ultimately, President Trump is going to make decisions that he views as in the best national interests of the American people. And it's about time that Britain had leadership that would do precisely that. Look, the reality is that the way President Trump has conducted foreign affairs throughout both his terms as president could well be described as a doctrine of called the madman doctrine, which is acting in a very, in many cases, unpredictable way and making your opponent, your adversary, believe that you're willing to do things that would be extremely detrimental to them. And if you were to judge him on his prior record on this sort of thing, he's not got a bad track record. Obviously, if desalination plants and critical infrastructure were to be hit and innocent people, large numbers of innocent people were to suffer, that would obviously be extremely grave, extremely tragic. I hope that doesn't happen. My belief is that we will end up getting some sort of a ceasefire. But the most important thing for British people, which is what fundamentally is most important to us at Reform, is that we want this war to come to an end as quickly as possible. We want the Strait of Hormuz opened up as quickly as possible. We want the restarting of the energy markets and the supply of gas and fuel to open up as quickly as possible. But I would say this important point too. The current Chancellor of the Exchequer of the United Kingdom is acting as a bystander. People watching this programme who are going to the petrol pumps and diesel pumps and fueling their vehicles, they should know that the majority of the price you're paying is taxation and government policy. Reform has already said we would cut those taxes, we would cut VAT on your home fuel bills as well. We are pleading with the Chancellor to take action to help struggling British people during what is obviously a really serious cost of living crisis.
Mm-hmm. Well, that plea may well be heard and be responded to. Let's move on slightly then, Yusuf, to the situation facing the Iranians. Now, as you will well know, Iranians make up 11% of people who've crossed to this country on small boats. There are some calls that there should be an expansion of any kind of scheme to allow Iranians to come here because their country is at war. What would Reform say to that?
I'd say that's ridiculous, and we should be doing the very opposite. We should be securing our borders and preventing people breaking into this country illegally, regardless of their nationality, but especially Iranian nationals. Look, Iran tops the league table. Almost 200,000 people have broken into this country via small boat over the last 8 years alone. The vast majority are men, most of them military-age men, and most of them originate, obviously they're coming from France, but they originate from Iran. MI5s, this is not my opinion or just speculation. MI5 are on the record as saying that they have successfully foiled 20 attempted terrorist attacks on our soil, some of which would have been mass casualty tragedies in this country with significant bloodshed of innocent British life from the IRGC, which of course is effectively the terrorist arm of the Iranian state. So how can it not be a national security of grave concern that we have tens of thousands of men from Iran? The chances that some of them are IRGC operators is extremely high. In fact, there are well-sourced reports that at least one of those terrorist attacks that was foiled, the men did come here via small boat. We need to secure our borders. We need to declare a national security emergency before it's too late.
OK, you will know that Iranians seeking asylum have a higher grant rate, 62%. I mean, the chances are that going forward, because of this ongoing war, that more Iranians could be granted asylum here.
Well, I would suggest that is a problem. Look, it is ultimately up to the British government to take care of the interests and to take care of the safety and to look after the national security of the British people. That is the remit of His Majesty's government. And I know the Tories seem to have completely forgotten about that over their 14 years, and Starmer is even worse. But we make no apology. We're going to make every single decision, whether it's national security or otherwise, through a simple lens, which is it in the interests of the British people? That's how Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, if he is elected as our Prime Minister the next general election, will make decisions. And if you make decisions through that lens, we need a secure border, and we should not be allowing, at this stage, any Iranian nationals to come to this country. Let's not forget, the Iranians have struck British sovereign territory. They struck an RAF base. We should not forget this, right? So regardless of what anyone might think about President Trump, that has happened. We saw His Majesty's Royal Navy, incapable of projecting power, couldn't get a destroyer to the theatre of battle in any sensible time frame. Our sovereign territory, that RAF base in Cyprus, was reliant on the Cypriot military's anti-missile defences, which is to the eternal shame and embarrassment of this country. We need to start taking our national security seriously. We need to rebuild and rearm and compete on the world stage. And first and foremost, we need to actually have a border that means something. And I don't think we should have any people turning up on our beaches illegally, and the notion that we should be increasing asylum to Iranian nationals at a time when Iran's regime is making the comments that they are making, and our own security services are warning about foul terrorist plots, I think is insane.
Let's move on to another topic then, and it's Kanye West. You will have seen the furore around his announcement as the headliner at Wireless. We've now seen that he wants to have a conversation with Jewish communities here. If you were to be Home Secretary, this would be a decision that would be on your desk. What's your sense as to whether someone like Kanye West should be coming here to perform?
Well, I think it's fascinating that you've got, Tory shadow ministers and the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister all weighing in on this particular individual. I would compare it, obviously, he's everyone watching this program will know he has got songs that are openly anti-Semitic, praising Hitler. It is deeply troubling that those songs would be played at a big auditorium in Britain. There's no doubt about that. But what about this Bob Vylan character who shouts extremely anti-Semitic things at concert after concert and, obviously broadcast live on the BBC in many cases? Where is the condemnation of that? Similarly, I would argue that regardless of any of these musicians' awful songs or awful lyrics, I think the chances that they would perpetrate a mass casualty event in this country, which should be a real focus for a Home Secretary and for a government, are pretty slim, I would argue. Whereas the hundreds of thousands of men turning up on our beaches from countries like Iran and Syria and Afghanistan, I would argue is a serious national security emergency. And we're told by Tory and Labour governments there's simply nothing that can be done about that. We disagree. All right, look, there was plenty of condemnation about Bob Vylan and that situation. I'm talking about whether or not Kanye should be allowed to come here to perform. Yeah, look, my view as Home Secretary is that would need to be carefully considered in consultation with stakeholders, including the Jewish community. But I stand by the argument that it is absolutely a bandwagon that's being jumped on. And the fact is that whether it's Bob Vylan character or Kanye West, the fact that we are having this discussion in the political media today and not the discussion about the fact that as we speak, hundreds of people are crossing the channel illegally, many of whom are from countries who have expressed extremely disturbing views towards Britain. And of course, one of them has struck British sovereign territory as recently as weeks ago, is a serious national security emergency. And I put it to you that is the conversation that we should be having on a daily basis, and we're simply not having it. Well, you and I did discuss migration in this conversation, Yusuf, and I look forward to our next one. Thanks very much for being with us. Thank you.
Now then, let's move on because, as journalists, this story feels pretty close to home. It's now been a week since American journalist Shelley Kittleson was shoved into a car in Baghdad and kidnapped.
Yeah, she'd been reporting in the Middle East for more than a decade, and it's a reminder of the dangers that journalists face while doing their jobs. Well, let's bring in the heads of the crisis desk at Reporters Without Borders, Martin Rue. Martin Rue, thank you very much for being with us. We should probably start with just a status update as what we understand is currently happening to Shelley.
Yeah, you said it. It's been a week and she's been abducted. So we are very, very worried and concerned because the more we wait to bring her safely home, the more her life and safety is in danger. You said it. She's been abducted a week ago in central Baghdad when she was going out of a hotel where she was used to stay when she was reporting there. And what has been lately reported to the press is that from different sources, she's safe, and she is in the hands of Kataib Hezbollah, a militia operating in Iraq. So she will be from different sources to the press. She would be held in the south of Baghdad in a stronghold of this militia.
And what does this say, do you think, about the dangers of reporting on this war? And is it more dangerous for freelance journalists, as Shelley was, as I understand?
Yeah, it's definitely very, very dangerous to be reporting on the ground at the moment in areas where militant groups are active. Of course, staff reporters have much more guidelines and contact with their newsrooms than freelancers. So they're many times much more prepared. I want to say that Shelley, I spoke to many of her colleagues and friends. Shelley attended a training for safety a month before she was abducted. She's a senior reporter, so she was also prepared, even though she took some risks, but the risks are also part of the job. So in many cases, to answer your question, yes, freelancers are much more isolated, so sometimes they could be more at risk than staff reporters, of course.
Yeah, and of course, I'm praying for Shelley's safe return. But it's a dangerous time for journalists, isn't it? I think last year was the record number of journalists killed. If I'm right in the statistics, 129 journalists killed around the world. And the reporting suggests that 2/3 of those journalists killed, 86, were killed by the Israelis.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, it's a very, very dangerous time to be a journalist. It's even more dangerous time to be a Palestinian journalist, because you said it, the biggest number of journalists killed in the past year, but not only in the past year, actually in the past several years, were Palestinian journalists killed by the Israeli army, some of them intentionally targeted because they were journalists. From the research that we conducted at Reporters Without Borders. But it's not only in Gaza, in Palestine. Journalists are also targeted by the Israeli army. We saw it recently in South Lebanon, where a reporter for the channel Al Mayadeen and her brother were killed by an Israeli strike. And we saw also in Lebanon the Israeli army using the same techniques that they used in the Gaza Strip to target reporters. To give you an example, they would use double strikes. So there is a first strike on a location, and then when medics and reporters are at the location of the strike, there is a second strike. So we saw this in the Gaza Strip, and we saw this also in the southern suburb of Beirut, where a photographer was injured that way.
Sorry to interrupt you. We must just say that
no problem.
Israel deny that they do target journalists. But Martin, we do appreciate you being with us, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We're going to be taking a look at how the markets are reacting to the Strait of Hormuz still being closed, with Donald Trump's deadline ticking ever closer.
Absolutely.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching. Tonight on The Wrap, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Cheap,
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive data showing every Palestinian who has been killed in Gaza since the war began. Our analysis of this pattern in the killings suggests that entire families were wiped out in their homes or shelters. The data and forensics team is a multi-skilled unit dedicated to providing transparent journalism from Sky News.
We located footage of the aid drop to a tent camp in central Gaza.
These airdrops are falling in extremely populated areas.
We combine traditional reporting with advanced analysis of satellite imagery, social media, and other open source information. Now, this is just one of the strikes and incidents we've been able to geolocate across Gaza. Sky News has found Nazi speeches and marching music have been used as background sound on tens of thousands of TikTok videos as far-right groups try and spread their message. Sky News has seen 72,000 posts used in this way. There's no evidence yet of foul play at Heathrow, but shows weaknesses that enemies could take advantage of. Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. Supporters say it saves lives and projects American power and influence.
I think we would generally be called far right, sure.
It's called Return to the Land, and they invited me in.
A lot of people are going to be, why are you making Nazi references?
Right. Well, why wouldn't I?
Its founder says he is building a fortress for the white race.
It's a racial association. I kind of want to ask you, after seeing this, do you think what we're doing is immoral?
We followed a social media trail that led us to Bristol, where a confrontation between protesters erupted into a full-scale riot.
Here it really is pitched battle skirmishes, hurling missiles, throwing punches.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Well, the Easter long weekend is over and the markets have opened and reacted to the continued instability in the Middle East. So let's talk through that with Russ Mould, who's AJ Bell's investment director. Morning to you.
Morning.
So talk us through the reaction on the markets. The oil price, obviously key here because it's going to impact all of us in terms of the cost of our fuel, but also inflation further down the line. So how are oil prices at the moment?
They're up a little bit this morning at about $111 a barrel for the Brent crude benchmark. So it's up 50% in the last month. So the question the markets are asking themselves now is, how long will the conflict go on for? Obviously, everybody wants it to end for humanitarian reasons, but also for selfish financial ones. And if President Trump escalates the conflict this evening and the latest deadline passes and he acts on it, then it would be logical to expect further disruption to oil supplies and therefore the oil price to go up further. But if there's a de-escalation and peace breaks out, maybe oil will come back and for the best of possible reasons and give consumers and companies a break on the cost of fuel.
What about the oil-producing nations? Is there anything else they can do? I think I heard that OPEC were going to release more barrels, but obviously they're stuck with where they are geographically.
It's pumping for all it can at the moment, and they are looking for alternative ways of getting the oil out. So they are looking at pipelines, they are looking at trucks, they are looking at alternative ports. So they are trying to do their best to keep the stuff flowing. To some degree, Iran has actually helped a little bit by giving Iraq permission to ship oil, which it didn't have previously, saying non-hostile nations can continue to ship. So there are some possible sources of assistance there, but at the moment, ultimately, there is less energy around than there was previously, and economic activity is energy transformed. So that's the ultimate challenge.
And Ross, if we look at the graph of oil price volatility, we can see how much it's gone up since this crisis began. I mean, if there were to be some kind of resolution, some kind of agreement, and Donald Trump didn't carry out his threat, would we see the oil price coming back down to the levels that we saw, as we see, up until sort of January, February?
It depends upon the degree of damage that's been done and how quickly that can be repaired, because we've clearly heard reports of damage to a fifth of Qatari liquefied natural gas capacity, for example. So it might not go back immediately to whence it came, but over time, you would hope so, all of the things being equal, providing that damage can be repaired fairly quickly.
What does that mean for consumers then? We were talking off camera about the price of petrol at the pump. It seems to me like it's just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge, and that is in the end a tax on consumers' wallets. It's a tax on companies' profit margins, so they may start to invest less. And if the economy did slow as a result, which it could do, government welfare spending might have to go up, tax income might have to come down. That could pressure government finances, and that's why we're seeing the government's cost of borrowing creeping up. Rachel Reeves was probably feeling quite pleased with herself after the spring statement. She'd done a good job of convincing investors the debt was under control. Now, through circumstances that are beyond her control, it could make life more complicated for her, and that headroom that she'd built, that could disappear in a worst-case scenario. Again, if the Straits of Hormuz are opened after any peace deal, that would help. If the Iranians keep the pressure on there, because they can, that could, again, elongate the process.
OK, really still lots of questions. But, Ross, really appreciate you coming in and talking us through some of the scenarios. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, right. Stay with us here on Mornings. We'll be back with your headlines in a couple minutes' time.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Kanye West offers to meet members of the UK's Jewish community as the boss of Wireless Festival defends booking the rapper as a headliner.
Houston, integrity, comm check.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
The crew of Artemis II back in range after travelling the furthest from Earth any human has ever been. We've got a special programme coming up at hour.
Donald Trump threatens to obliterate Iran in 4 hours tonight unless a deal is reached to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Also today, we're going to hear from the Line of Duty star Vicky McClure and her actor and producer partner Johnny Owen about their new show, exploring the murders that have changed the country.
Plus, a 6-day doctor strike has begun this morning. The NHS urges patients to keep their appointments. Hello, very good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start this hour with the growing backlash over Kanye West's headlining London's Wireless Festival. The rapper has responded to the outcry and has offered to meet the British Jewish community ahead of his show.
Yeah, well, the Board of Deputies of British Jews is calling for Wireless just to cancel Kanye for his anti-Semitic remarks.
Yeah, in an open letter in the Wall Street Journal addressed to those I've hurt, the rapper said his only goal was to come to London and bring unity, peace and love through his music.
Yeah, the boss of the festival defended booking him as the headliner and asked the public to forgive him. Well, let's bring in our correspondent Molly Malone for a bit more on this. So, Molly, this has moved on quite a lot since we first spoke this morning. We've heard from Kanye now. What else has he had to say?
Well, there have been lots of developments. To quickly sort of sum up where we are, essentially. Kanye West was booked to headline Wireless Festival about a week ago. That sparked outcry and outrage from the Jewish community, many Jewish groups, politicians, but also the sponsors, so Pepsi, Diageo, withdrawing their support. And just to remind people, that is because over the years he's made numerous anti-Semitic remarks. He released a song called Heil Hitler. He sold T-shirts with swastikas on them, and he hasn't performed in the UK since 2015. So there was real concern at the prospect of him performing to 150,000 people at this festival in July. And as you say, there's been developments this morning. We've now had this statement from Kanye West. He said, "To those I've hurt, I've been following the conversation around wireless and want to address it directly. My only goal is to come to London and present a show of change, bringing unity, peace and love through music. I would be grateful for the opportunity to meet with members of the Jewish community in the UK in person to listen. I know words aren't enough. I have to show change through my actions. If you're open, I'm here." And we then had a response from Phil Rosenberg from the Board of Deputies of British Jews, responding directly to that invitation to meet with the community. And he said, even while claiming remorse today, his latest album includes a track first released last year with the abhorrent title Gas Chamber. The Jewish community will want to see a genuine remorse and change before believing that the appropriate place to test this sincerity is on the main stage at the Wireless Festival. As such, we are willing to meet Kanye West as part of his journey of healing, but only after he agrees not to play the Wireless Festival for this year.
Wow, so this is, I mean, as you said, this is like developing all the time. So Rosenberg responding again to his previous statement and sort of taking it a step further. But this could all be taken out of the hands of everyone else involved, Kanye, the Board of Deputies and the festival themselves, if the government make a decision.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth just reminding people, we also had another statement overnight from Wireless essentially defending their decision to invite him in the first place, basically saying, look, people deserve another chance. He's suffered in the past with mental health issues, and his songs are already on radio stations for people to listen to. So, you know, give him a chance and let him perform. But as you say, there is a chance that actually it goes beyond a Wireless decision, and that the government, we know that they are reviewing Kanye West's permission to enter the UK. That's a decision for the Home Office, but it is, you know, it's something that's been done by Australia in the past. They've blocked him from going after he released one of his songs appearing to glorify Adolf Hitler. It was something that you put to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, this morning, who essentially said that he was appalled by Wireless's decision to invite him in the first place. I think we can hear a clip.
Resident doctors have been the standout winners of the entire public sector, and they've still gone on strike.
Are you prepared just to ride out these strikes? This is the 15th since 2023.
Yes, we will.
Apologies, that's obviously the wrong bit of the
We'll hear that bit later.
We will hear that bit later about resident doctor strike. But he, when I asked him about the Wireless Festival himself, we can actually hear it now. Let's listen to what.
Kanye West has no business headlining the Wireless Festival. I think organisers showed a terrible error of judgment in inviting him. These weren't a couple of off-colour remarks. These were, I think, a pattern of behaviour. The releasing of a song called Heil Hitler, the plastering of that slogan across T-shirts, then using bipolar disorder as an excuse, and then when he realised the impact on his fame and his career, came out with a mealy-mouthed apologies, which has now been given a fig leaf of credibility by festival organisers who should be ashamed of themselves. So, look, I'm appalled, actually.
It's pretty strong, actually, from my stream there.
Yeah, pretty strong remarks from him. And I think probably making an important point from the perspective of some in the Jewish community that we have seen apologies from Kanye West in the past, and then later he appears to backtrack on them. Today's one's slightly different in that he's saying, look, I'm prepared to meet with you if you're prepared to meet with me, and to talk about it and to apologise in that way. The Board of British Jews, though, saying not before you cancel your headline performance at Wireless. So lots of different developments. And meanwhile, people are left in limbo, people that want to go to this festival, because tickets are on sale in the next few hours, and it appears, you know, there are lots of fast developments, but no clearer, as he's the only confirmed act as it stands.
Fascinating to see what happens with ticket sales tomorrow.
Yeah, or later on today, I think.
Yeah,
some of the
midday.
don't they?
Yeah, pre-sale.
Yeah, Molly, thanks very much indeed. Now, from today, let's turn our attention to the issue of resident doctors, because they are on strike in the ongoing row over pay and jobs.
Yeah, NHS England is urging anyone who needs it to seek care regardless. Earlier, the Health Secretary, as we saw a bit of, said the government will mitigate against the impact of any industrial action.
Resident doctors have been the standout winners of the entire public sector, and they've still gone on strike.
Are you prepared just to ride out these strikes? This is the 15th since 2023.
Yes, we will mitigate against strike action.
Well, Ashish Joshi is standing by for us in central London and joins us now live. Ashish, morning again to you. So, look, the government, they're saying they're going to mitigate against it, but patients will still be feeling that they might not get the service that they deserve today.
Absolutely. This line about mitigating the strike action came about last week, Kamali, when the boss of the NHS, or boss of NHS England, Sir Jim Mackey, said the NHS now needed to find a way of working around these doctor strikes and to make that the norm. So what they're trying to do is find ways of operating where strike action taken by resident doctors simply doesn't affect the day-to-day workings of the hospitals. But if you think about that, what that means is a reduction in services, because these resident doctors will be performing duties that the hospital needs for the number of patients who need treatment. So lots of questions around how exactly Sir Jim Mackey aims to achieve this efficiency. It's through better use of hospital resources and time management and efficiencies. But that's sending a clear message to the BMA. That's telling the BMA that you carry on with your strike action, and we will carry on trying to reform the NHS and make it a functioning health service without over-relying on resident doctors. And that's not what these resident doctors on these picket lines want to hear. A lot of these placards say, we need jobs, and that was a reference to Sir Keir Starmer, who then became involved in this dispute last week by saying, if you don't call off this strike within 48 hours, there will be a reduction in training places for speciality services, which means there will be fewer jobs for resident doctors to go into. Resident doctors complain that even after going through university and getting their medical qualifications and spending 2 years training in a hospital, there are no jobs for them to go to, even though the NHS is crying out for more doctors to treat more patients. So it's a very complicated situation. But as far as the message that the government is pushing through right now, that the health service is functioning, it's open, and it's clearly putting all of the blame on the BMA. This is what Dr. Jack Fletcher from the BMA's Resident Association, Resident Doctors Committee, had to say about the strike action and why it had to be called.
Doctors have faced the largest pay erosion in the public sector for well over a decade, between 2008 and 2024. So we are already starting from a lower baseline compared to the vast majority, if not all, of the rest of the public sector and the private sector as well. All we're asking for is to avoid further real terms pay cuts and to restore that lost value, not just in one go, but over a number of years. We're happy to negotiate that. We thought we were negotiating that. We came to the talks in good faith. We spent 8 weeks without calling any action whatsoever. And then right at the last minute, like I say, the government chose to reduce the value of that investment and then stretch it over a number of years.
What is really concerning is Dr. Fletcher, at the end of that interview, I asked him whether the talks between the government and the BMA were ongoing, and he said no, they are not ongoing, which means the start of the six-day action, which begins today, will carry on for 6 days, and it's likely, unless these two sides can get around that negotiation table and find a way through this, that these strikes will continue because they are mandated.
All right, Ashish, for now, thank you for that, and of course more from you throughout the day here on Sky News. Well, to the US-Israel war on Iran now, and Donald Trump has threatened to obliterate Iran in one night unless the Strait of Hormuz is reopened in just a few hours' time.
Yeah, Donald Trump says that Tehran has until 8 p.m. Eastern time, that's 1 a.m. UK time, to comply with his deadline, or the US will destroy every major bridge and every power plant and face what he's called living in hell. If he does go ahead, this would amount to a series of war crimes and drive up energy prices yet again. Here he is making the threat.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to. We don't want that to happen.
So all eyes on that deadline, 1 a.m. UK time. We'll, of course, bring you all the latest this time tomorrow.
Indeed.
Right now, though, let's tell you what's coming up. We're going to be joined by Vicky McClure and Johnny Owen, the duo behind Sky History's show, Britain's Murder Map, which should be fascinating. Stay tuned.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Now, of course, you'll recognise Vicky McClure from her on-screen roles uncovering crimes. Well, now the actress and her actor and producer husband, Johnny Owen, are turning their hand to real-life stories.
Yeah, in Britain's Murder Map, they investigate historical murders, miscarriages of justice and milestone cases that have changed the law. Let's have a little sneak peek.
I'm Vicky McClure. I've spent years playing police officers on screen. My husband, Johnny Owen, is a historian and filmmaker. We share a passion for finding out the truth.
Together,
we're going on a journey back in time to explore murder cases that have changed modern Britain.
Oh, God. He's basically saying, I'll do time for these people, but when I come out, I'm going to kill them.
That's pretty good.
I know, I'm drawn in already. And very happy to say that Vicky McClure joins us from Belfast, and we've got Johnny here with us in the studio. So welcome to both of you. Really good to have you on. Vicky, first of all, why did you want to make this series?
Well, there's a sort of variety of reasons. I think what we're all really interested, obviously, there's a huge audience in crime, but finding out the truth, I think, is one thing that we're all very invested in. For me, I love to learn on, as an audience member, and I think this is the opportunity to do that. Johnny's brilliant at looking at the facts and the history, and I was kind of looking more from an emotional side of things. I just saw, actually, on that clip, there's like... it says on the paper, a picture that's been taken, dead woman's home. Just gives you a real insight into the way in which history was reporting back then. You're kind of appalled by what you see. And so I think what I loved was just how we was able to unpick things and see how far we've come in terms of, history over the years.
And Johnny, how far have we come, and do you think that we have moved on? I mean, you look at some pretty sort of seminal cases in the series, right?
Yeah, we do, and it is interesting that law, like life, is constantly evolving. It has to be looked at all the time. The way we police, the way we prosecute people, things have changed so dramatically over the last sort of 200 years, where we started with the infamous body snatchers case in Edinburgh, and everybody in Scotland would say they weren't body snatchers, they were serial killers. So it's very interesting to see the way it was reported, but lots of interesting parallels as well. They were immigrants, there was social deprivation, misogyny, lots of things we still see today. And Vicky often points this out that, we've still got a way to go. I think eternally looking at the law is important, but we can learn from the past as well. We can learn things from cases. The one that interested me in particular was the case of Timothy Evans, who's from the same town as me, Merthyr Tydfil, and I grew up with this story, and he was a big part of the abolition of the death penalty. And we were still hanging people in Britain when the Beatles released Hard Day's Night. It's quite shocking when you say that to people. Sounds almost Dickensian, but this is how much things can change, and that was changed because he was hung and he was an innocent man. Wow. And it took people to sort of campaign for that, and then the law gets changed. So this series is about how crimes can affect the way we live even today, and it's important we look at these crimes and learn from them.
Yeah, really interesting. And Vicky, of all the cases that you covered, was there one to you that particularly stood out in terms of its significance, or a particular injustice that you felt strongly about?
Yeah, I think the Bible John case is a very fascinating case, in so much as the way in which the three women were spoken about, the language that was used within the statements, the police reports. It just really upset me that it felt OK that at that time, that's how they were, it kind of seemed as if they went to the club, they went to Barrowland, and, because of that, they were, in a position to be, brutally murdered. It just was kind of the way in which women were perceived back then. And, it's not an easy world for women now. So like Johnny just said, there is a long way to go, and we've still got a lot of work to do in terms of, women's safety. So, yeah, looking at that case, I found fascinating. I was also able to speak to some of the victims' family members. It wasn't that long ago in the great scheme of things. And so I think that case, and also the fact that, this creation of Bible John was put all over the papers, of one man's sort of perception of how he looked, and that's who everyone was looking for. That just wouldn't happen today, given the technology we've got.
Well, you mentioned papers again, and that's kind of my next question, Vicky, because I suppose the way that things were reported then were very much through the lens of, one journalist, the person that was there, and perhaps their editor. Very different now, as you say, but I wonder how much social media kind of has some of that, and there's lots of misinformation, there's lots of misreporting on social media, and I wonder if you've considered how much social media sort of reflects some of that older time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. AI, what are we seeing? Is it real? Is it completely made up? And so there are reflections of the past, for sure. I think now, because of DNA and because of science and technology and CCTV and all those things that we heavily rely on in crime, we are able to, get a better picture. And also comes down to language again, how somebody is interviewed compared to how somebody was interviewed back then. Two very different stories. The police were writing, they were taking the interviews, and then they would go away and write what they'd heard. You can't do that. We've got to record. It's got to be video recorded. Context is everything.
Did I spot Irving Welsh in that?
You did.
Yes,
there he is again.
He is. He's a good mate of mine, and obviously he's an Edinburgh boy.
Trainspotting author, of course.
Trainspotting author, yeah. So
what was this particular case while we're looking at the pictures?
This is the first episode. It's on tonight, 9 o'clock on Sky History. It's Burke and Hare. These are the body snatchers, but like I said, as everybody in Scotland instantly tells you, they were serial killers.
Right.
They never actually snatched any bodies, but they were caught, and they were quite prolific over a period. But there was like a death market. Because Edinburgh was a centre of medicine, and there was no provision, I know, for having bodies, they would sell bodies. So they worked out if you killed somebody and sold the body, you'd make money. So they got a taste for it. But interestingly, even then, Anna and Cam, the doctors who bought the bodies, returned the blood, they all got away with it. The people at the top got away. It was one of them was hung. The other one sort of turned grass, as they called him at the time. So there's this fascinating story. The parallels you still see now, sort of redacted files you see from crimes 70 years ago, the famous Kelso Cochrane case, the racist murder in Notting Hill. That's redacted in another 50 years. You're like, well, who's been protected there? What happened in the higher echelons of law allows people to be protected? So that's still stories that we're still telling to stay, and I think people will find it fascinating.
Yeah, really well. And 2 murders as well in that first case, which is kind of unusual itself, right?
They were like a duo. Even their wives, they say, were implicated as well. They worked in a lodging house, and there was always people on the margins of society they got. There was one character in particular, they describe him as having learning difficulties today, called Jamie. He was very popular in the local community, looked after, he was an orphan, and they killed him, and he was the one that got me. I thought, he kind of reached across history to me. I thought, oh, this poor lad, Jamie. And those are the stories that really sort of affect you. But it's so important we tell their story.
Yeah.
And Vicky, you are so well known, as we said in our introduction, from dramas like A Line of Duty. I mean, did you actually learn something from filming those series? Because I think that you did get advice from real-life police officers, didn't you? So did you actually learn something about how to be a detective from working with the police?
I've got good friends that are real police officers, and I can tell you the training that goes into what they do, I haven't done. So I don't want to sort of seem as though, oh, I've done a show and all of a sudden I know what it's like to be a real police officer. I just have the same curiosity as, you know, as an audience member and as somebody that has gone with that kind of dialogue and understood statements in the way that I have because of the show. But no, I'm kind of the audience member in this scenario. But I'm fascinated by real stories, and I'm fascinated to find out the truth. And I think for the victims in all of the cases that we cover in the show, it was really important to do it, really. But no, Line of Duty is me acting, for sure.
Is that right? Look, Vicky, Johnny, we can't have you both here without talking about sort of the industry and the work that you guys are doing, and sort of getting a sense really as to what you think of it at the moment, whether or not you're talking about telling stories from the past, whether enough stories are being told from all sort of walks of society at the moment in the industry.
Yeah, it's a subject that me and Johnny have spoken about a lot over the years and recently. You know, the working class voices, they're just not, it's not equal at the moment, and it hasn't been for many years. We've got a company called BYO Films, and we formed that to basically give opportunities to actors and working class writers to tell authentic stories. Art should be for everybody. It's really simple, and it's you know, for the audience members as well, they want to see their own lives reflected authentically on screen. And I just think, you know, we compared it a bit to football in the past, where you go, if you look at what football do for, you know, grassroots and academies, we really should be doing that within the arts. There's a lot of money in this industry, and I just would like to see it, you know, given out into people's worlds where they can't actually access drama schools or certain courses because of, you know, the postcode or because of their financial situation.
Is that the big block? Is people not being able to afford to train?
I think it's a massive part of it, and the stats, you know, I think it's only 8%, and that's being sort of optimistic of our industry from working class backgrounds. It's quite shocking. We think 60% still of people in Britain consider themselves working class. So it's just about finding talent, and I don't think, Anna, anybody can argue against equality of opportunity. Nobody can argue against that. So if you go into these areas and you find these kids, you know, you're missing out on talent, I think, and that's why it's so important. And if you come from somewhere like I am in Merthyr Tydfil and you go into a school there, you should be able to say to kids there, you can work in this industry, and whether it's presenting, acting, or behind these amazing people behind the technical people on cameras and grips and electricians, they should know that path is available to them, and it's not at the moment. And that's been proved in the stats, and that's something that needs to be addressed and changed.
It's funny, though, isn't it, John, Vicky, because we've kind of known that, haven't we?
Yeah.
And I don't know, we probably find ourselves now where I think that people do find themselves in the arts are more likely to be from better off backgrounds.
Yes.
We're almost like we're losing out when we're going a bit backwards with it.
Yes, we are. And like you're saying, I mean, nobody's saying that, you know, take the middle-class stories or the you know, stories of aristocracy and history away. They're brilliant. They sell across the world. But as Vicky said, authentic working-class stories also sold brilliantly across the world, and there's less and less of them. We had a glorious period, they call it the kitchen sink period in the 60s, which was world famous. You know, we need to go back and find those writers and those actors again, because we're missing out.
Absolutely.
Well, we're sadly out of time. Vicky, I would ask you to try and give us some spoilers for the next series of Line of Duty, but I'm pretty sure... You wouldn't say
Vicky,
yes anyway, would you?
We've always got Sky News on the house, so we should give them a little
come on,
bit.
it's fair trade.
All I can tell you is it's going really well.
Well, I'll take that. We're very excited about that as well.
She's well trained, isn't she?
She's very well trained.
Thank you, Vicky.
Tried my best.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you both
Thanks for
and
having
hear
me
about
in,
your
yeah.
new series. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.
All right, well, after the break, we're going to turn to space as we continue our series of specials on the Artemis II mission.